Hello world, welcome to another episode of the Consulting Diaries. Wow, it's been a while since I've been here. April has been tough, but the road to 100 looks good. We're at 92 subscribers, and since I've been gone, I was able to drop episode 4, A Day in the Life of a PwC Consultant, as well as give you guys a bonus episode on what I was up to during Easter. But we're back. I'm almost back in championship mode, and episode 5 has been cooked. So today, pretty much following in the footsteps of A Day in the Life of a PwC Consultant, but the essentials of being a PwC consultant. So yeah, let's dive into it. Cool. So new location. I thought it was fitting to shoot in the office. This is actually pretty cool. I actually found a nice spot, floor 14, to actually shoot. Got some nice chairs. I got my notebook with my notes. Today's a bit tough if I look away from the camera quite a lot because there is a lot of content and I wasn't able to sort of like flow through everything. So I might refer here and there. But yeah, feel free to kick it with me. Check the link. The slideshow is there, so you can follow the slideshow while I speak over it. So yeah, essentials of a PwC consultant. This is pretty much like the 3 things that I would say I've picked up quite a lot in my 2.5 years here, and what I think PwC really does well, right? So it's might not be essential to someone else, but it's literally essential to my consulting career. So essential in terms of like the skills, like using it day to day, and I think they're really fantastic. So let's dive in. So first and foremost, we have storytelling and creativity. Everybody loves a good story. Second, we have using feedback to accelerate your professional development. I mean, we need to get to the top, right? Otherwise it doesn't make sense. And the third one is the art of negotiating. Scary, a lot uncomfortable, but it's actually not that deep. But it's not that simple either. So a lot of work has to go in there. But pretty much those are the buckets we're going to be discussing today. So yeah, let's take it from the top. So storytelling. Literally point number 1, everything is storytelling, right? Music, movies, motion, gestures, text messages, art, literally everything. And it's basically to say you can literally incorporate everything into to tell a story, right? Even WhatsApp status is storytelling. Then the next thing is storytelling is about storyboarding, right? What is storyboarding? Storyboarding is basically whatever story you have, can you take it out of your head and put it down on paper, right? Storyboarding. If someone said, okay, you have 10 pages to tell the story, would you be able to do that, right? So you have to know your audience. Who are you telling your story to? Who do you want to tell your story to? So if it's of the client, are they C-level, are they mid-manager level, or are they like day-to-day operations? We would like more detail, but the guys at C-suite, the women at C-suite, you know, they sort of like, or just like an answer, right? What does this mean? What do I have to do tomorrow? Knowing your audience is important. And using horizontal and vertical logic, right? So if you were to, so with PwC we use slides quite a lot, and the one thing they really do with us is, okay, cover all the slide except the heading, and does that heading tell a story if I flip through it page by page, if you have 10 slides, for example, or 5 slides, right? So that is horizontal logic. And then when you sort of like bring what you put into the slide, where you put the graphs, where you put your text and all of that stuff, then that becomes vertical logic, right? Because vertical, then horizontal. So horizontal and vertical logic. I struggle with those two actually. I struggle with those two, so it's a work in progress. Then also being able to flex different styles, right? Do you build up a story, or do you put the answer up front and then you sort of like tell the story afterwards, right? It's sort of like what Marvel did, where for 10 years they built the story and the one thing I like is they flipped it, right? After they gave us the answer, they literally diverged from the answer and gave us like 100 other answers. So if you're a Marvel fan, you know there's What If, you know there's Loki, WandaVision, and. And you sort of like have to watch it because you want the story to make sense to you, right? So you know, being able to like create a story and sort of like pull different stories from it, that is also quite cool. Then practice makes perfect, right? The more you practice your being able to read your audience, the more you practice flexing your styles, the better you get at storytelling, the better you get at what does the person who's going to consume my content need. You know, what do you guys need? You know. Yeah. Then my favorites, have the courage to be the drama, right? You know, storytelling is about evoking emotion, is capturing the imagination, being an inspiration, inspiring people into action. You know, and sometimes we sort of like leave that at the door because we work in corporate, we dress up to work, and you know, some teams you're not free enough to like bring your personality, you know, but still doesn't mean it can't come through in your work, you know, it doesn't mean it can't come through in how you write, you know, so have the courage to be the drama, you know. Storytelling is about being authentic, right? So if you are authentic, if you read the room, you know, if you push your mood through, then you're doing the right things. And it's not about forcing it, right? So it's all about just being authentic. That's literally it. If you're happy, cool, create happy slides. If you're feeling, you know, then yeah, let your slide reflect. Obviously, don't be dark or like, don't say something insensitive, right? Your moral obligation does not disappear just because you're feeling some type of way, right? So storytelling is all about being, authentic, right? And practical examples, right? And I learned this last year because a friend of mine was like, they did this at the client. So basically, they won the project. They went to the client, you know, and the client was like, had seen the proposal, and they're like, okay, how are you going to execute? You know, they told the client, you know, this is what we're thinking, this is what we're looking like, and then the client was like, you know, not sure if that'll work. And then the team was basically like, okay, cool, give us a day, let's rethink, and we'll come back to you. So they came back, and literally what they did is they literally put all the improvement areas in the front, right? So basically, literally show the client, look, this is the standard, you guys are doing this. You guys are doing this, this should be this. You guys are doing this, you're not doing that, you're not doing that, you're not doing that. This is what you should be doing, this is what your competitors are doing, this is what the Lawrence is doing, and in essence, you're creating a burning platform, right? Because now the client is sitting there like, oh snap, I'm actually not doing this. Like my competitor is doing this, like, you know, I'm losing ground in the market. And then basically that sort of like is to inspire the client to think very deeply about what they want, right? And then obviously you also have to balance that in terms of like, this is what you're doing well, you guys are actually like A grade over here, you're leading here, right? So, you know, depending on how much you have to inspire the clients, depends on how much you have to make the fire bigger. All storytelling, right? Factual, has to be factual. Otherwise, you are manipulating the facts, and that's not storytelling, right? So I thought the burning platform was a pretty cool thing. And you can also balance that, right? In terms of like, tell the client what they're doing well, and then sort of like saying, well, let's get you from like top tier to like uncharted territories, right? That also works. One other practical example is in 2019 when I was getting into consulting, I did this case study. So it was a case study competition. Pretty much was about a bank. They wanted to like enter new territory, and in 2019, Endgame had dropped. So pretty much Thanos, Infinity Stones, Avengers, time travel, Infinity Stones, all out war, right? And it's no surprise I'm a Thanos fan. So I pretty much just was inspired by the whole collecting Infinity Stone, and I literally like created my case study according to that. If you see the presentation, if you click the link, you'll literally see how the case study was broken up. So there are 6 Infinity Stones, right? So my solution was basically created according to like 6 different things to sort of like do or recommend. And yeah, I really liked it, and it got me first place, so that was pretty cool. But yeah, that's pretty much it for storytelling. Just being authentic, knowing your audience. Feel free to bring your personality, right? Cool. Next is using feedback to accelerate your professional development. I'm not great at feedback, right? Like, I used to get anxious whenever people around me talk about, oh, we have feedback for you, whether it was good or bad, right? But when you come into PwC, you understand that feedback is actually one of those mechanisms that they give for you to grow yourself, right? Really big on feedback, on the spot feedback, because the feedback ties into the professional metrics of what they expect from a PwC consultant. That then ties into how you're graded using our snapshot system that tracks professional your feedback, and then your professional reviews, your performance reviews are then used at the career roundtables, CRTs for short, where people then rate you according to your performance, how much you've done this year, and where they think you are. So it all starts by hitting feedback, because when you get feedback, you want to be like, okay, this is what I need to do, this is what I need to improve, and then you keep it going, right? So feedback, PwC professional metrics, snapshots, career roundtables. So you need to get it right? PwC is big on feedback. Then the second thing is feedback should be balanced, right? It's not about giving good feedback only. It's not about giving bad feedback only, right? Your feedback needs to be balanced. And more times than not, you need to offer appreciation before you try to criticize someone. So, this is speaking from the point of giving feedback, but also if you receive feedback, right? I feel like, it's nice to feel like I did this right, I can improve here, right? I think that's really cool. Well, that's how I look at it, right? Gotta mix the good with what could go better. Balance view. Then the third one, which is actually really important and sort of tries to remove as much bias from giving feedback as much as possible, although it's really difficult, right? Is the quality of feedback you receive, right? So we're talking about, who do you receive feedback from? Do you receive feedback from your manager? How good is your relationship with your manager? Does your manager only say nice things about you? Does your manager only say bad things about you, right? So it's important that the person who gives you feedback is able to balance their feedback, because then you trust them, right? You trust them in tough times. You can go to them and be like, look, this is what happened. I did this. What do you think? And they'll break it down for you. So my coach is really good at doing that. When I go to him, I'm like, look, this is the decision. I don't know what to do. Then he'll be like, okay, cool. Let's take a step back. How did we get here? What are the positives of getting here? What are the not so great of getting here? And then from there, you kind of pick a solution, or the answer sort of comes out generally, right? And don't be afraid to challenge feedback, right? Feedback is not a one and done, right? It's basically how people view what you've done, your work, how you carried yourself, how you gave a presentation, right? Don't be afraid to challenge feedback, but don't be defensive about feedback, right? Don't try to make excuses. That's one thing I had to stop myself from doing. Every time I receive feedback, I wanted to be like, oh, I thought about that, oh, I didn't do this, but I was just like, alright, cool, this is the feedback, alright, cool, I'll take it as an advisement. Don't be defensive, challenge the feedback, but don't be defensive. And it's tough to sort of measure, but that's why having a pulse circle really comes into play, because your friends see you on a day-to-day most of the time, or maybe not day-to-day, but your friends are able to tell you, dude, I think you were being defensive here, or dude, well, you actually have a point in terms of A, B, C. So also lean on your friends. Like I said, your feedback sources you have to trust them, right? It's important. Otherwise, you either ignore the feedback or you take the feedback too personally. Then two other bonuses is there's a TED Talk by Sheila Heen. She basically talks about how to use feedback from others to grow. Really, really cool, quite funny, so check it out. And the other one is not really directed to feedback, but it's basically saying you need a growth mindset to be able to use feedback in the right way, right? What that means is a growth mindset says intelligence can be trained through dedication and hard work, right? And if you believe feedback can be part of the tools that you use, it actually fits into like the picture to say, okay, I'm going to use feedback, I'm going to be dedicated, I'm going to work really hard, and these things are sort of like going to build and grow my technical expertise as well as my intelligence. So that's why feedback is really cool. All right, and in terms of like practically how feedback works is when I get feedback, I don't read it immediately when I get it back, right? Because wow, I'm still anxious, right? But I do read it eventually, and I pick two things I've done really well, and I pick two things that are still could be developed, right? And what I do is I keep them front and center so that when I'm going into like my next presentation, my next client meet, when I'm working on my next deliverable. So recently, end of last year, the one that I got was I don't really focus a lot on what's happening in the market, right? Like I understand in terms of like the product, where the product is made, what goes into the product, how to source the product, all of that. But my market knowledge in terms of like where do we get the product, which suppliers we get the product from, how much it goes, what's the market doing. I don't really focus on that. I was like, cool. Since then, literally every time it sort of like comes to that product, like I dive a bit deeper, right? In terms of like, okay, cool, if it's like, if I read the news and it's saying the market is like 5%, then I try to dive deeper in terms of like, okay, what's happening? Like, why did it go up 5%? Why did it go down 5%? Why is there stock crisis in one part of the world? Why isn't there a stock crisis in another part of the world? And eventually I just became so good at it that I literally sort of like understand what's happening, as well as speaking to like suppliers to like testing knowledge in terms of like, okay, this happened in another market, could it affect this? And yeah, in the next round of feedback, that was taken as quite high. So I really focus on like what the development says, because like I want to get to a point where it's like, so what's next, right? Look, I back myself. So that's the practicality of applying feedback, right? Third part, the art of negotiating. Also my favorite, but storytelling is more my favorite, right? And basically what negotiating says is, negotiating is literally a give and take to put yourself in a better position. Whether you're talking about like negotiating like fair increase, your salary, whether you're negotiating something at the shop, doesn't matter. We negotiate everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Kurt William fans will get that joke. Literally negotiate everything. And I'm gonna give a couple of examples, right, in terms of like, what do I mean when I say negotiate everything? Then the second thing is develop a negotiation strategy, right? Especially if you know what you're gonna negotiate about, your car insurance, your car premiums, your exits, whatever. If you know, then what's happening in the market? What are your other competitors saying? because most of the time we use different service providers from our friends. So find out, okay, cool, how much did you pay this? What's your inflation at? That. So market research is really important, because you can go to whoever your service provider is and be like, listen, the market is doing 4%. Why are you guys at 6? Why are you guys at 8? Why is your excess this much? Why am I paying on buy excess when like the market excess threshold is 700, for example? Right. So research is important, especially in terms of what you want to negotiate, right? The other two things about developing a strategy is like win-lose, and I like this one because negotiation is not about winning right now, right? It's not about being the most favorable position right now, but sometimes you need to consider the win-lose for future reciprocity, right? So if I talk about like something I'm dealing with now, right, is my salary. For example, the last salary I got last year, I expected them to hit a number, they didn't hit it, right? Number is still in my head. This year, there's a number that I expect them to hit, and hopefully they can hit it. But if they don't hit it, that literally sort of like goes in like the gap that I feel like, I have lost over the last 2 years. And then it's sort of like, well, okay, cool, we're here now, my work is solid, I'm not trying to go anyway, repay your faith and the patience that I've shown, So sometimes win-lose is really cool, because you can lose now to be in a much better position in a year's time, in 2 years' time. But of course, nothing is guaranteed, right? So to each their own, really. Then the last one is the rehearsing, right? You gotta be able to rehearse. You have to rehearse your strategy, right? Not like your job depends on it or something, but you always have to know, right? In terms of like, what are your must-haves? What are your tradables? What are your non-negotiables, right? How to counter, how to maneuver from like being backed in a corner, all of those things. And the more you rehearse, the more you sort of like meditate over them and play them through your mind, the easier it gets to a point where you actually like just walk and breathe. And that's why just knowing things is really, really cool. Like reading different sources of information. For example, we know inflation is like 10% global, right? That's something you need to know, right? Because if you're negotiating your salary and you don't know that inflation is 10%, yo, dude, then you inflate, then your salary increases like 15%, and then it's like, well, my dude, like, come on, stick with it, right? So, you gotta know stuff, especially in terms of like which markets you want to like negotiate about, the things you want to negotiate about. Then the last point on negotiating is practicing negotiating behaviors. And this one is really cool. PwC actually taught me this. There's 4 negotiating behaviors: emotion, logic, guarded threat, bargain / compromise. Now, emotion is pretty much winning people over, Then logic is like sort of like discussing important flows of arguments, that you can only unlock or discuss when there are numbers involved, right? Like the inflation thing. Then guarded threats is not my favorite. I never use that, right? So guarded threats is like, give me this or else. It's like, you promised this, but this isn't happening, right? It's coming from a place of lack of power, right? And you always want to show strength in a negotiation. Whether you have it or not, you've got to be ice cold. Ice cold? Ice cold, right? It's all about perception as well, right? Then we have bargain or compromise. Now, I don't like these ones as well, but if you use them quite well, it can feed into that win-lose future reciprocity I was talking about earlier. To sort of like, okay, cool, you guys are not hitting my salary number, for example, but maybe you consider me for a double promotion, or you consider me for like a different promotion out of like my line of service, because I really like that side of the business and I've only been able to bring it up now, right? So depending on how you play it, you can literally just make that work for you. So those are the 4 behaviors, right? And the essential thing is, in any negotiation, you have to be able to walk away, or you have to be prepared to walk away if your values are on the line, right? What do I mean? Like, I didn't actually think about it. I was speaking to a friend earlier in the week, and he's like, "Yo, dude, this is what's happening, and I don't feel right because like my values are like on the line here, and I'm just gonna walk away." And I thought that was really powerful, right? Because he's been wanting this for a very long time, and now that it's here, but it's compromising something that's really close to him. He's like, "Nah, it's cool," and he's considering a couple of options, which for me I thought that was like really brave, because we work so hard to put ourselves in a certain position, and then when it comes, and then we just have to think about our values, and it's like, well, do they really matter? But it's really nice to see that it does matter. So be prepared to walk away from a negotiation if your values are going to be compromised. That's an essential. And if we're going to talk about practical examples of negotiation, the one is pretty cool. So back in varsity, a couple years ago, I was involved in TEDx University of Pretoria. So one of my responsibilities was sort of like getting us sponsorship and funding. So what we did was we leveraged what we had as a society, which was our branding as being part of TED Global, and we leveraged our marketability in terms of having access to about 70,000 students on the main campus. And we basically, those were like the 2 main things we focused on, and we told like the companies we approached, like, look, your marketing will be great, our brand will be great because we put you on a global website, our videos on YouTube, our videos get published on the TED platform. Worked well in some instances, didn't really work well because people still want to get paid, right? So sometimes it's tough as a student society. But yeah, we did what we could, and yeah, it was actually really good. So that was a really cool thing. But that was before PwC, right? So that was like going on instinct and sort of like what we have versus what we don't have and how to fill that gap, right? One thing I learned after PwC during is literally just negotiate everything, right? So for example, the place I stay, they called me 2 weeks ago. They were like, we heard you want to talk about like renewing your lease. Don't worry, we're still figuring out May and June, but we'll get to July and August. So I was like, alright, cool. And then I asked, what's the rental increase looking at? And they're looking at 10%. Then I said, well, less than 10% would be great. And then the lady was like, might be possible, So first step, we planted the seed, and yeah, we'll have a chat when the time comes up. But for me, I'm going to use emotion, right? It's basically, since I've came there, I've been great. The house is still in good shape. I stay out of trouble. I stay in my lane. There's no reason for you to let me live another year at a very good price, right? I pay my rent on time. That's the emotion to win people over, right? Then the logic would be, well, why 10%? Because inflation is at 6%. National inflation is at 6%, right? So it's like, well, come on, you got to do better than that to prove that I need to pay 10% on my rent, right? So that's the logic part, something that's undeniable. But it doesn't always work in your favor, right? That's why for me, emotion is like number one, because you can captivate someone no matter the situation. You can captivate, you can get someone to empathize. I'm not gonna use guarded threats, I'm not gonna use compromise or bargain. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. So pretty much that's how negotiating goes. Just want to check my notes to make sure I didn't miss anything. And it does look like I didn't miss anything. So yeah, that's pretty much it essentially. In terms of the essentials of being a PwC consultant. Now these are sort of like just tidbits, and in season 2, I really want to like deep dive into each separate topic where we literally talk about like start to finish, like 20-30 good minutes. We're talking about storytelling, we're talking about feedback, we're talking about negotiating, right? Giving practical examples. So that's some of the things I've planned for season 2, but we're still in season 1 and just wrapped up episode 5. But there's one more episode to go. So gotta think about what I would like that to be. But yeah, that's it for me today. You know who I am, Championship Mode _ on Instagram, as well as I Live a Modern Life. On YouTube, I am the Consulting Diaries, and on LinkedIn, I am Emmanuel. Thank you, world. Thank you for tuning in. You know where to find me. And I gotta hit you with the company motto, right? Like, share, follow, subscribe. And as always, stay championship. Can't believe we did it. Damn, we did it. Literally did it. What? Mad. Unruly. Well done. Right. Let's go. It's pretty nice up here. The view is quite nice.